Good evening, sir. Glad to have you here with us today. People will be joining soon, within 5 to 10 minutes. So we'll start in 5 minutes or so. Sir, your audio isn't audible. Like, we can't hear you talk. We're still unable to hear you, sir.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think it was just muted. All right.
Yes, sir.
So, should I try to share the screen or something? Presentation.
You want to try it once before we start, sir?
Yes, if I can just open the presentation and just share my screen.
Yeah, sure, sir.
This is the first time I'm using WebEx. So
okay.
Okay, is this good?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. I think we'll just use that. Stop sharing. Okay.
architecture, is that what you really, really want to do more than anything else in the world?
You gotta find your own voice.
And the architectural profession was just not doing anything to advance.
The practice of architecture today is anything you choose. Your job as a graduate is to figure out what you want that to look like.
John, thanks for the honesty.
It's just not knowing what's next after graduation.
They have always felt if you know what you're gonna do in advance, then you won't do it.
Have you ever wondered what other careers you could pursue with a degree in architecture?
Hi. So, a very good evening to everyone. We're extremely happy to welcome you all to the second session of Archcult Musings, the Archcult 21 guest lecture series. With our theme as dimensions this year, we're exploring the various niches that influences and are influenced by architecture. So, we would like to thank each and every one of you for joining here with us today. And on this occasion, we would like to thank all our sponsors, our travel partner Red Taxi, our creative partner Vacom, our online publicity partner ArchiVoice, our photography partner Indian Institute of Photography, and our workshop partner Karwa Klipocher and Prayog.
I would like to introduce our guest of the evening, architect turned set designer and concept artist Anshuman Prasad. His projects, Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, Captain America, the Winter Soldier, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and many more, need no introduction. He studied architecture in Manipal University and practiced architecture in India. His decision to design for cinema brought him to Hollywood and has inspired a number of students to follow in his footsteps. He's also a visiting professor of the University of Illinois Urbana campaign. His life is a true example of what our theme stands for. We're very excited to get an insight into your experiences, sir. And we're really happy you're here with us today. Over to you.
Thank you, Anuradha, and thank you, Gaurav, for organizing this event. Again, I apologize to everyone. We were supposed to do this last weekend, and I completely missed that. But thanks for everybody who's here. Great to be a part of this. And pretty much, I guess, yes, like the introduction, I am an architect turned set designer. I design sets for movies and televisions and occasionally for commercials. Pretty much, I guess, broadly, most of the skills that I learned in architecture schools are the ones that I use today. A lot of my colleagues are from formerly architects or have an architectural education. A lot of interior designers as well. I'd always seen set design as a part, as almost like a specialization in the field of architecture. And most of my work consists of conceptualizing, designing, and drafting, and overseeing the construction of sets. So right from the very get-go, from the design through to the end phase. So to start with, I think what I'll do is very briefly give you an introduction of how what's my journey been here, and as well as I can show you some slides of my own work, which will give you a good idea of the breadth of the work that we do. So just as a start, I want to say that, mostly it was following a dream, something that I believe, you should never forget to do. I have always been interested in movies. I think one of my very first movies that I watched was Superman, the Christopher Reeve's version. A lot had to do with my parents as well. My father was very involved with, showing us English movies and getting us videos and etc. for that. And also, I think that just that whole world of action movies and, that's something that really excited my dad. And I think that that's something that I learned over the years as well. At architecture school in 1994 in Manipal. In fact, at that time, it was just to Manipal College University. So it's been a long time. During those years at Manipal is where I actually fell in love with Hollywood movies. We would watch, movies a day. Sadly to say, it was all movies. It was fun, and it was the only way to get to watch that and see that, being in India. And I think that to a large extent, movies and my, love of the form blockbuster and all the action movies, I think it kind of fed my architecture education, and it was kind of inspiring me, as well as to some extent, I wanted to see architecture in the movies. I was always, there might be a lot of action going on, but I was interested in that glass which wasn't breaking unless you shot at it. Very nerdy, but that's how it was. In the beginning, and I think it wasn't really sure if it was a viable career. And I think that was the biggest revelation and the discovery that I made over the years was the transition from architecture to set design. And it was many years in the making. When I was in Manipal, there was this Bollywood movie which had come by, and they built these two massive houses out of plywood, and they were shooting there. And that was when the initial idea, I think, came up as to, hey, somebody's got to get paid for making these things. So that, and then I worked in New Delhi with Associates, Center for Architectural Systems Alternatives for about 3 years before I finally, came to Illinois for my master's degree. And that's where during my master's degree is where I actually formulated this idea of set design and getting into it. And there were a few concrete steps towards that, which was one of the things was taking classes in the field of cinema and film. I had taken one which was about new media, and well, at that time, in 2002, it was new media. Today, it is everywhere, Netflix and that kind of stuff. And also in just the theoretical understanding of movies. It's all good and fine to be watching a lot of movies, and you see a lot of stuff and you learn from that. But to have a general idea from an educational point of view of just understanding the scope of a movie, what somebody's trying to express, how they are trying to express it, all of that stuff. That year, I really tried to try and use that to transition. Also, my architectural thesis was about architecture in cinema. And again, that was a huge part of understanding what my career would be as well. So in 2003, I think, 2003, I moved to LA. It's been a very fun journey, but I will say it doesn't come without its obstacles, and it is a lot of hard work. But, I think the biggest part of it was that I was enjoying the work that I did, and that was really important. And it didn't matter the difficulties and all the stuff that you had to go through. So it's Hollywood's been a wonderful place to work and meet a lot of people. It was on Die Hard 4, Live Free or Die Hard, which I actually got into the union, which is a kind of a big part of our Hollywood industry, is the labor unions, which protect the which is a kind of a big part of in the field. Excuse me. So, just very briefly, I can, couple of things. When I first started, it wasn't like I, immediately came into the field of set design. I started as a PA, which is a production assistant, which is, the only non-union job that you can get on a movie. But it is the best way to meet people, to show, to express, show your talents, see what you can do. And after which I found myself in the creature world. I was working with this creature designer and building, dead bodies and monsters and werewolves. It was a lot of fun. I think that a lot of people that I met at that time have gone on to, become very close friends. Even the designer that I was working with, I still work with him a lot of times, almost every year. And he was the one who actually, got me into the union. And I think, just to digress a little bit, I think the apprenticeship idea and this idea of having someone mentor you into the field is a large part of what we do, I think. And it does help when somebody guides you through the initial steps, because a lot of people from very different fields come in to this. There are production design master's programs offered by schools around in Los Angeles and elsewhere, but that's a recent phenomenon. I think most people from my generation, I guess, come from different backgrounds: architecture, fine art, motorcycle racing, a friend of mine. So there's no fixed criteria, and I think that it's all up to what you do, what you bring, and your work ethic. Just very broadly, I get to meet a lot of people. Like I said, it's a very large work circle. But then, considering that as far as set designers are concerned, there are only about 300 or 400 of us in the union now. It's not a very large number, and you do pretty much know somebody who knows somebody else. But again, that the advantage of that is that while you're working with them, and then you can end up being friends with them for the longest time. And a lot of my friends have been people who I met at work, and then we just kind of kept the relationship later on. Overall, I think that in the beginning, it was, again, for the first 4 or 5 years, I would say it is a bit of a start. I think the first job is the most difficult one, and then you go by word of mouth. People hear about you, and it becomes relatively stable. I would say that I work about 9 months a year, very much by choice. But the only problem with that is you never know when the breaks are going to come. You don't really have a fixed vacation period, or I work freelance, so if I just choose not to work, that's my break. But it's it's not been a problem so far. You do get to travel quite a bit, internationally, within the US as well. Over the years, Toronto, London, Rome, Detroit, and New Orleans. So at different times, been to different places. You end up spending, 4-6 months sometimes. And I think over time, the travel becomes more of a problem, but you want to stay home with your family. But, it's part of the industry, and it does attract a lot of people. You do get to go visit wonderful places. And as I go through the presentation, I will kind of briefly, talk about the art department and what the setup is and what the world of the structure of the industry looks like. and also the variety of work. And yeah, so I'm going to share my screen. So yeah, this just gives you a very brief idea. It's kind of chronological in terms of what is this? Yeah, in terms of the projects. So starting with one of my very early projects, Terminator Salvation, I got to take the truck from scratch with the through the design and the concept and the drafting and the build phase. This was back in 2000 something, 8 or something, yeah. But I got it to take it through all those phases, and you can see the amount of work that goes into the final product. They actually ended up making 3 of these, to use in different scenes. One of them gets blown up, and the other one actually has an engine in it which runs. These things get so heavy, they don't go more than 30, 35 miles an hour. Total Recall, again, one of my very fun projects. I got to work with people, who are really friends. And that's, I think that one of the big parts about it is that when you can get a chance to, work with friends, it's fun. And you guys, that's kind of the biggest metric, at least for me, is the people I work with and that's the most important thing, really. So we built a lot of this set, as you can see below in the bluish image, bottom center. The set was built pretty much one floor of this kind of like an intersection or like a vestibule module before you go into the passenger cabins. And it was somewhat complicated because the passenger cabins rotate, and you can see in the bottom left-hand corner window how the baffles are kind of turning. You can see this thing over here, so this entire thing would spin as this thing goes to the center of the planet and stuff. And so it was interesting trying to achieve that motion within the set. And we do a lot of that. In fact, just on a show recently, we built an entire C-130 cargo plane and put it on what we call a gimbal, which is a giant machine that basically shakes it, and moves it. And it's a huge, and imagine that kind of weight put on a machine, and with the pistons and everything that has to go with it. Captain America, the Winter Soldier, gives you an idea of the journey. The script is kind of our brief to some extent, and the script gives us a guideline as to what are the spaces and how much of the space we're going to see. And of course, we go through with storyboards, and the director comes in, and we have discussions with them. And in a large part, it's also deciding cleverly as to just to build enough for what's going to be seen on the camera. If you're not going to turn the camera around and look at the back wall, there's no need to build the back wall. So, so you can see from the journey itself, the upper slide 1 and slide 4 show the actual film version and then the designed version of the space. This was like a warehouse that we had found in Los Angeles, which they had converted to, to be this set. And he basically, it's the space 4 where he comes in, they take the elevator down, and they come into the space, which is like number 3. It was an interesting set because one of the biggest challenges about this was that this set, or whatever the storyline was, that this space had been created by the US military back in the 1960s, but the story was set in the current day. And, this balance between what is retro and what is still science fiction, that was the most difficult part about this. This is one of the concept illustrations of the set. I guess, he comes into this space, and within the computer is the Zola. He's the bad guy. I'm sorry. I think that after a while, between Marvel and Batman, everything, you get the names of the characters. 300, yeah, I loved the first movie and it was really wonderful to get a chance to work on the second one. You can see again here how, even though the entire ship here has been designed, we only choose to build certain sections of it. And you can see the front bow of the ship. And what we also do is, for example, we can build two bows to attach to the back of, to this portion of the ship. So we can get two different versions. So there's a lot of cheating and moving around stuff, which never, you never see it, but it's, it's part of the, the process of set design. Ah, yes. So Batman versus Superman. I had designed and, constructed this entire, the Batwing's front cockpit area. And so a lot of times, I get to do concept design where I'm just doing this beautiful illustration and, that's it, and I pass it on. Sometimes it's all about this kind of very engineered idea, where you're actually having moving parts on the plane. Initially, you can see that this, the chair section, it was built as a separate unit because it was supposed to launch out of this, but then that design, that got written out of the script, so we then didn't need to do that. So, the design, things change and are quite flexible, but then, all of this was done within the period of 6 months from design to build and everything. So it's a very fast process. Again, an illustration from Batman versus Superman. And this one, I really liked, and also, I was able to use the same concept in Justice League and actually develop the rest of the space, which is much more, and I would say this, if you guys haven't seen Zack Snyder's cut of the Justice League, you should. It's so much better, and if he spent so much more time on the sets, and you see the sets and, you see nice wide shots, beautiful shots of the set, and it's much better than the earlier version. This one again, one of the things that got written out of the set, I spent quite a lot of time on it, but just that whole character of Cyborg, I don't remember the character's name, but his entire character got written out of that script, and so we didn't build the set at all. But the entire set was designed. We had worked out this entire thing where the man is dropped into this machine. He is, we had this mechanism that would activate and bring him into the surgical position over here. All of that, and this entire pieces would all be built around this time. Passengers, sometimes, even though, coming from an architectural background, I end up doing just props and, details. This hibernation pod control panel is about the size of a palm. So it was interesting to jump, from this large scale where you're designing buildings and, massive spaces to designing something really small and fine. And one of the things that I did for that was spend a day, I broke open a cell phone and tried to just look inside, and it was very interesting how they pack the batteries now. So anyway, an illustration from Justice League. So on Justice League, we got to take a lot of the concepts from Batman versus Superman through to the next movie. One of the first opportunities that I got to do that. And also on Justice League, I did different things. So like this one was just an illustration of the space, where the flying fox would be landing. Sorry, hangar. I then spent a lot of time on the build and the modeling of the flying fox itself. It was designed and modeled inside out. The complete inside cargo hold, the cockpit, all of this was all modeled. They built a lot of this stuff in England. But the entire model was essentially used to build the toy afterwards, which doesn't look very good. Kind of disappointing. Again, a series of props for the movie Rampage. I had worked a lot on the space station set, which is in the beginning of the movie. But then again, as you work through the set, you start to figure out, oh, okay, we can do all this in CGI, which is computer generated imagery. And, we only need to build certain things. So the build ended up getting much smaller and smaller for the space station. So, most of the work I did on that show was props. And props are things that the actor touches and the actor interacts with anything. And it's a completely different department. It's something that the set designers are approached to design and help with that, but it's somebody else's responsibility, which comes back, yeah. Pacific Rim, interesting project. I designed this kind of like a lab / control hub for the robots. All my movies are robots and stuff. Anyway, this submersible was very interesting. It's still a project in development. It's very much a one-man, going deep into the ocean just by himself and kind of delve into his own psyche. But the submersible itself was a lot of fun. A lot of fun research, into people who have built stuff like this. Yeah. Oh, Westworld. Yeah. Loved working on this show. Loved the show, Westworld. It's a wonderful project. It was interesting because what was happening was this was for the second season, and this was the Japanese village part of it, the samurai world. And what we had done was taken an old Western town set in one of the studios over here, and the idea was to do minimal amount of work on them to make them look like a Japanese town. And if you look at the show, they've done an amazing work. Everybody, like different set designers were working on different buildings. I worked on a few buildings there, and I think it all came together at the end very well. Another one from Westworld, server room. Oh yeah, this was 6 Underground. We shot in Rome. Excuse me. You can see all the design work that has gone into it. And I think one of the big elements of the design and the build of this set was the fact that, there's a sniper sitting across and he shoots this glass. The water falls through, and it funnels through this and, comes down through the building, and it launches everybody out, from top of a multi-story building in Hong Kong. And I think that the biggest challenge on this was to make it look interesting for that exact sequence of actions to happen. And also the fact that there was so much water coming down. When we built the set, we had right off on the side over here, we had huge tanks of water, 3 huge tanks of water. And there was almost like I think 20,000 pounds per second of weight, which was going to fall into this glass funnel over here. So it was interesting just to, to design that, to build it in a country, where we didn't know the language and stuff. And, but, there was a great crew, wonderful people to work with. And it all came really well together. And they actually did the shot where the water came down and it flushed right out of the back. And it came out well in the movie. And you can see the scope of the build. This was built outdoors. We built a 3-story building. I mean, it was all, steel structures clad with plywood made to look like concrete. But we did use travertine for the floors. And the ceilings and everything, were fully constructed. So it was quite a big undertaking. Maleficent, yeah, love designing the castle. Considering all my movies are dark and, I end up in a dungeon somewhere, it was wonderful to design something so lively and, so rich. And yeah, we must have spent about 3-4 months for the entire design process. I think from the beginning to the point where we got to the broadly, okay, this is the design we like and let's start detailing it. It must have been about 3 weeks max. Yeah. So it happens very rapidly, the entire process. More interiors and shots of the castle. Some of the sets that were actually built of the exterior of that, the wedding that they built, the castle ground itself. You can see it's surrounded by blue screen, and essentially, you build a small little section of it, and then you extend it in with visual effects. The balcony also was built, and you can see all the elaborate work with the flowers and the greens that go into it, and all that stuff. Every little flower is carefully placed into position. Okay, that was the last slide. Yeah, thank you for listening. Open to any questions. If you guys want me to go back to a slide, I can go back to that. Anuradha, how would you prefer? Should we stop sharing?
We did collect a few questions from our participants beforehand. So we'll ask those questions first. And when they're done, maybe if the audience has any other questions, they can proceed with that. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So first of all, there is one question for me also. But before asking a question, I would like to thank you for such a wonderful presentation. And I mean, all of the things that you have shown us today. I mean, these are some of the favorite movies that we have seen, and obviously looking behind how the sets were created, it's like seeing our favorite movies come live today. So yeah, everything was very relatable to us. And what I would like to ask you today is like, you showed us the Batman versus Superman thing and the things like that. So is it only the director's input that you take, or do you also have your own input into what the set design goes? Like, is it like, how is the process done, the creative process behind it? Do you have your own input, or is the only director telling you that, okay, this thing needs to be done, and you do the execution part of it?
So there, we start very early in the process of the movie. Pretty much we are the art department, and the concept artists are one of the very first people to get hired. Sometimes, like in the case of that submersible, there isn't even a script. And, this is very early on. I worked on that a few years ago now, maybe 6 years ago, and that movie's still not made. And I was working with directly with the production designer and the director. So it's different. Like, I pulled up this shot of Justice League because in Justice League, I think that the time when we started, it was really early. And to some extent, the things that we were designing, the director was then kind of, playing off of what we were designing to add to the script and to add to the action. So it's not like we get to rewrite the script or anything even remotely like that. But, especially with action movies and the blockbuster kind of thing, some of your set design can influence the action. I mean, if you come up with this cool thing that, oh yeah, my spaceship is going to do something, like this, it can maybe rotate in this particular direction or something, that might give the director an idea, like, oh yeah, what happens on the inside? Maybe, if it rotates, the guy might, there might be the sequence over here. So stuff like that does happen, I think, when you're early on. But again, it can vary from project to project. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So I'd like to ask another question. So this was asked by one of our students. So going back to your very initial days in Manipal, so how was architecture then? So they just want you to talk about your architecture experience as an architecture student.
I think Manipal itself was a very wonderful place to study architecture. I really enjoyed it. But I think that mostly that had to do with the movies than the architecture itself. The place was wonderful. There were these 3 or 4 video theaters, we used to call them, where they had these projectors, 60 seats or something, and they would play video cassettes projected on a smallish screen. And they would change, 5 movies a day, every day new movies. But architecture itself, I think that I felt it was somewhat rigid, and I think that in my 3rd year in architecture, Professor Varkey George, he was teaching at the University of Illinois at that time, and he had taken a sabbatical and come down to Manipal to teach a semester of design. We were 3rd year students, and I think that semester, he really focused on this idea of, just design with a concept. Forget about something that can't be built or anything, just free yourself and just design whatever you want. And I think that we all designed buildings and they were all buildable, but we were able to explore certain styles and stuff which we hadn't gotten an opportunity to do before. And I think it's very important that even though, there were some very real considerations of structure and electrical and all of these services and everything that come into an architecture, into any building. But, I think that the design should be the guiding principle behind, any architecture. And you need to make the services that you need to force that stuff to work for you rather than let it control you. But, I would say that one of the big things that I learned in school over there was 3D, 3D Max. At that time, it was on DOS without even Windows. And I think towards my final year, maybe 98, 99, is when one of the professors, he was kind of playing around with it. And he suggested that, hey, why don't 3 or 4 of us get together and he'll teach us, but then it was kind of like exploratory for him as well. And I think that, stuff like that, new things that come around to your school, definitely, grab onto it eagerly.
That was quite interesting and relatable being students right now. So thank you, sir.
Yeah. We have one more question from one of our students. It says that, one of your previous speeches, you had said that you didn't know about set design as a career option after you did your PR. So we have now near 2 decades, and we hardly know about any career options like set design. We only know about some very options like landscape design or urban design, things like that. So in the foreign countries, what are the career options that a student goes for? Yeah, so we would like to know about them as well.
So I have been doing this class with the University of Illinois every year, and I speak to the students over there. And to a large extent, I would say that it's still relatively not as well known, even in the US. I think there are more and more students are exploring it, and I think that this with production design programs now being offered, you can kind of, go into the field of cinema and production design right off the start, from your undergraduate level. Also, I think that, you can study MFA, BFA, and then go into MFA kind of program. And I would say that I think that personally, I prefer the fact that, architecture and architects, you come from a much wider scope, and the skills that you learn in architecture are so much wider that you are able to use them in any field. And I think that it's not just the US, even in India, there's a lot of very interesting movies happening in India. I think that just about the time at the end of whatever the last, in the 90s and the 80s, Indian cinema was, I guess, we ended up with the same kind of blockbuster and all of that, the big masala movie and stuff. But I think people started experimenting in the late 90s. And I think now they're doing some incredible work, even in the field of, art directing and production design. They are working more. And I think that it's up to your own interest, and you need to explore that and try to reach out to these people and see what they have. I think I don't really know many other fields that people are going into. I think that within architecture itself, there is a lot of, I guess, project management and that kind of, management kind of field. There's a lot of that. But I think that design-wise, you could, to some extent, I would say product design is completely open to architecture as well. It is something that you might want to do like a, postgraduate or something in, and then get into product design. Wish I could give you more of an insight into that. But I think it's just, you have to, initially you have to explore certain things and leave yourself room to explore. Sorry, I hope that answers your question.
Definitely. Thanks a lot for that.
Hello, am I audible? So this is Madhur. Yes. I wanted to ask one question. You've shown us all the concept arts and how it's built and everything. So how much of your work is on site and how much of it is in your office? Like, how much time do you spend on site? Do you look after it at every process, or do you just keep a check or something like that?
Pretty much throughout, you take it from the design phase all the way through to the, to the construction. And in different projects, you get, a different role. Like Justice League, what you're looking at right over there on screen, I was working from Los Angeles, and all the construction and everything was happening in London. And even though I must have spent a good 6 to 7 months on this project, maybe even longer, I never did a single construction drawing or anything. I wasn't involved in that process. But if you, for something like this house, this building thing in 6 Underground, I was, right to the very end of the day when we handed over to the crew to shoot. Till that day, you're involved with every little process. And I would say it's about 50-50, your time between offices and stuff. On the projects where I'm, more of a concept artist, I think that, my time gets solely, tied to a computer pretty much. Which is, it's interesting, but I do like going out there on the field and, seeing the work done and interacting with the people, who actually build it. I think that's very interesting because they too have their own ways. And, we are building everything mostly out of wood. And, it's minimal amount of steel and stuff. And, MDF and plywood is what we build with. So I think that, you have to talk to the carpenters and everything, because they come up with interesting ideas as to what and how to build. I mean, right now I'm working on Mandalorian season 3, and I think, yeah, just in terms of trying to achieve that level of design and the quality of build in a budget of a TV show, you have to get really clever and, as to how to build and what to build.
Thank you, sir. And I have one more question from one of our students again. It says that is set design different from VFX and animation, or is VFX a tool that you use to achieve the set of your dreams? And what software do you exactly use in this line of work?
So just quickly in the software, I personally use 3D Max and AutoCAD. Something that, it's an India holdover. I just learned on that and I use it. A lot of my colleagues mostly use Rhino, Maya, and one software, Vectorworks. Yeah. But it's relatively fluid. We exchange a lot of models all the time, different softwares, especially like shows like Mandalorian, everything comes from the VFX department, from a Maya software, and we import everything and then break it down. So could you just remind me the first part of that question, Gaurav, again?
Yeah, it says that is VFX same as set design, like VFX animation is same as set design or not?
So no, it is very, very different. That's the thing. The simple answer. It is blending a lot nowadays. And Mandalorian, for example, is a very good example where VFX is almost, in a sense, that the people working for VFX are sort of controlling the design direction. We have something called a VAD, a virtual art department on that, and it's a new department kind of thing, which is driven by the technology that we use on the show. But the virtual art department kind of feeds us models, 3D models, and where we break it down as to what part of the model we need to build, and the rest of it can be CGI. But no, set design is more about the build environment. I mean, what you would actually build on a stage. The VFX is, wherever you saw a blue screen, for example, would be a VFX extension. So nowadays you can see, for example, in this balcony here, right? If this person's standing here and that's the 7 or 8 foot height of a door, right above that, it's all VFX. So it's very fluid as to what they can do for us. And I think that there's a lot of interaction now between VFX and our department, and we go back and forth like, hey, okay, so how much do you need us to build? We just build it there. We sometimes even give them break lines and cut lines to help with the build with the CGI. For example, going back to this one, the entire plane was VFX, but we actually created this kind of, like a design line within the shape of the cockpit, which would help us join the two pieces together. So, yeah, I think that it's very fluid. VFX also has something called Previs, which is kind of like a very more technical and much more modern version of storyboards, where you kind of animate the scene beforehand to show the action and how it would go and stuff. And while they do that, they end up designing some of the spaces as well. And that stays sometimes depending on the director. Sometimes we just take the idea and then we can do something completely different. But most of all, the thing is that the entire, making a movie is a very collaborative process, and every little piece has to work together with everybody else. And the more you can collaborate, the more you gel with everybody, the better your product comes out.
Thanks a lot for that, sir.
So I have another question for you now, sir. So can you talk about one project which is very close to your heart, or some memories or experiences which make you love being a set designer?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So one of the projects I worked was Barbarella, which never got made. It's this, it's Barbarella. It's based off a comic book, a French comic book. But I think that the people that I was working with, one of my closest friends, Patrick Totopoulos, who I've worked with, even back when was Superman, he was a production designer and been friends with him for the longest time. Him and another person they were working with in a very small office. And I think it was that experience which was really fun, besides the fact that, we were designing these really atrociously out of the world worlds, Yeah. Barbarella was this woman who was traveling through the universe, having her adventures and meeting people. And, there was this planet which was a casino, this entire planet was a casino. So I think just in terms of that, it was a lot of fun. 6 Underground, I got to spend a summer in Rome. It was just amazingly wonderful. I had family over there and stuff, came over, and it was, yeah, I guess it's not always the work which is the work itself which is most exciting and rewarding. It's also what comes with it. So the Mindy Project, for one, I really enjoyed it. Spent about 3 or 4 months working on the Mindy Project. I think one of the last seasons. And I think there was this one episode where she's supposed to come down to India in Bombay, and we shot it all on the backlot in Universal. And all we did was, put up posters, and we made a few little building facades and stuff. And, they found a rickshaw from somewhere. And it was, I was trying to get them, make sure it didn't look Mexican and it looked Indian, because they were quickly shifting towards that. But, it was fun. It was really a lot of fun. And she's a wonderful person. I think, just stuff like that.
Yeah, so just hearing you talk about it is quite fascinating, and Barbella does sound like quite an interesting movie. So, thank you, sir.
I have a couple of questions. So, as someone who wants to pursue a career in cinema as a production designer or as a filmmaker, as you mentioned, there are courses right now like MA filmmaking, MFA in production design. So, what does an architecture graduate need to do to get into these courses, or do we need to have a certain kind of prior knowledge about these subjects, because there are courses like bachelor's, BFA and all that, which they learn prior to masters. So should architecture graduates have prior knowledge to get into these kind of institutes to get an MFA degree? And also, what kind of creative portfolio should we have to get into these universities and to get a degree and to start a career in cinema?
So my own path, is architecture, and then film. I did my undergraduate in architecture, and I did a graduate program, with an emphasis on design in architecture again, and just directly entered the film world. Very frankly, I would say you actually don't need any MFA in production design. The skills that you have in architecture, you are good to go. When you do, the bigger hurdle is the union and trying to work in the union. And yes, and besides that, if you want to work in the US in Los Angeles, being Indian, there is the issue of the visa and all of that. And from that point of view, the MFA or in production design will be helpful. You don't need any other, you're fully qualified to enter the production design program for the master's program. You don't need any other qualification. I would say that your portfolio itself, stylize it. Give it more glamour, give it more, make it stand out. It's less about, I guess it's more about the looks, I think that initially a portfolio, it is always about, what the portfolio looks like. But while an architecture school would consider the projects and the amount of attention and the time you've spent on a project, a film school might consider the visual aspects of the project, and what you bring to it and what your design theory, or your concept behind it is. We are very much a world of concepts, and back when I was studying, concept was, of course, you're supposed to have a concept and you design around a concept in architecture. It's going to be a lotus and we're going to design the building around a lotus, but it becomes somewhat abstract as you go along the process. In the movies, it's a little more, it stays that way. And what the concept artist comes up with is very much what you see on the screen. The final shot, including the lighting and everything, they try to match that a lot. So, try to, orient your portfolio more for a visual medium. Architecture is so much more engineering and so much more elaborate. It's a much bigger field, and then, we get our inspiration from architects. So, just think accordingly. And like I said, you don't actually need any kind of qualification or anything, MFA in cinema, in production design. Also, I'm not sure if an MFA in production design or something from the local universities helps you with the union as well. There is a program of apprenticeship in the union where if you start off as a PA in the art department, you can slowly, you're brought into the union at a later stage. So they do have that, and I think that students from different parts of the world, they are trying to expand our diversity. I mean, very honestly, I know 2 or 3 other Indian people who work in the art department. It's a very small, and I think that there's a lot more people who should be working. And people coming from outside, young, talented artists, it's very important to have that, to revive the industry, to keep it fresh. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it certainly does. From that answer, I had another question that popped up. So you spoke about union and if you need to work, you need to get into the union. So I've heard this even from Indian set designers, when I've heard their lectures or when I've heard them talk, even they have talked about a union that's there in Indian cinema. So I just wanted to know more about how this union works, or what does this union exactly do?
So the union itself is part of the International, Artists Union for Theatrical and Film Productions. And they incorporate everybody who works behind the scenes, including, cinematographers, editors, construction crew, stunts, everybody who works behind the scenes. And then individually, different departments have their own unions. So this is the local 800, the Art Directors Guild is what, who I'm a part of. And you can go to their website, adg.org. They have a lot of information on that. But the union, essentially, it's a group bargaining tool. Essentially, they protect your salary, they protect your hours, they protect that you're not exploited by the producer, or the show that you're working on. Just 2 weeks ago, we were almost going to strike. Not 2 weeks ago, a week ago, because of really long work hours and people working 20-hour days without a break. So all that is protected by the union. But there is a bit of a catch, is that the union itself is kind of protective about who gets in as well. So every studio movie being produced by Sony, Universal, Warner Brothers, Netflix, Amazon, all of these studios, they all are signatory of the union. So every person who works on the movie has to be a member. But production assistants can be hired. Sadly, they are the lowest, of the crew. Well, there's security guards below them and extras. But that is a good way to get started in the union and to get started, in the field, and you can meet people. I must have spent about 2 movies doing production assistant, and then went off into the creature world. And I was, from there to again, I was doing some art directing side on the side. But it is a bit of a complication, and the union is being more open going forward, trying to get newer people in there. They are, like I said, this apprenticeship program that they've incorporated wasn't there in my time. It was pretty much, for us, it was if you are in the union, you can work on the movie, and the only way to get into the union is to work on the union movie. So it was kind of like a catch-22. There's no way to do that. So, but there are ways where somebody can grandfather you in. For example, a production designer says that, hey, I like this person's art and I like his style, and I only want to work with them. So, then the producers are, asked to approach the union, and they make their petition. You go through, you have to take a few tests, safety tests in classes, and as well as a series of classes trying to give you an idea of what set design is like and what are the differences. And I think that those classes, I think it's 3 classes of 6 hours each or something, which pretty much give you the broadest idea of what set design is like, especially if you're coming from architecture or interior design. Yep.
Yes, thank you. It's very good.
Yeah. So I have one more question. It's like you said that you did a thesis on architecture and cinema. So what were your inferences or findings that you could get after you did your thesis or during the process?
Yeah. So my thesis, I was focusing on towards the end of it was the idea of how much of a role does architecture play in the movie and in the story. In some movies, I figured architecture was actually a character. It didn't have lines, but it had a presence. It was actually doing things. And in some movies, the architecture was moving around and controlling the characters and where they went and what they did. And then there were some movies where the architecture was just this beautiful backdrop, but that's all it was. It was just meant for the scene to happen. And almost like, you don't pay attention to that at all. And you need to look at the characters, and that's the most important thing. So the conclusion of the thesis itself was this, chart where I kind of graphed out or laid out the progression from architecture, like in a movie like Dark City, where it's moving around and shaping itself and changing, and new buildings are being created all the time, to something like, I think it was like American Beauty or something, where the story is completely about the story and the architecture is just there, and you need to almost be muted a little bit. So that was the conclusion of the thesis itself. But for me, the learning was that, hey, different movies, what the set needs to do, how you need to respond to the story. I think that was the biggest learning part of that thesis, that I learned from it. Yeah.
Thanks a lot for that, sir.
So I have a question for you. So you are a conceptual artist, and in architecture is itself as architecture students, concept is such a big word for us. Like everybody, like all our professors, they tend to focus on it a lot. And sometimes it's quite confusing what that concept is supposed to be. But could you just tell us how your thoughts and view on what a concept is has changed from being, an architecture student to now being a conceptual artist for huge movies? So yeah.
I think that as a student, the concept was much more metaphorical, much more, esoteric. It wasn't a real thing. And I think that as a concept artist, the word has actually changed. It's not quite the same thing, really. In architecture school, your concept is a very broad guiding principle. And that really works for architecture, because architecture isn't, the architecture isn't fanciful, and it cannot be, this something that you just dream up. It has to be something real. People have to use it safely. It has to be constructed, and it has to survive the real elements and everything. Which, of course, in cinema that doesn't happen. Our concepts are more about mood, I think, the basic. So, what you want to convey from the scene to your audience. So, you put in clouds and like a gloomy sky, or you make it bright and cheerful, depending on what the scene is. So it's more about the feeling rather than a guiding principle, I guess. And in a movie, every scene, for example, has a concept in a way. Like, this is my concept look for this particular scene with this kind of lighting, but the next scene might be completely different, might be designed by somebody else. So the concept of the movie itself, it's like, if I was to equate the word concept from the architecture world, I would say that the concept applies to the whole movie. If it's a thriller movie and it's meant to be a sort of commentary on on the social culture of the place, that is the concept of the movie. But the concept of the scene itself is more about the feeling and the emotion that you're trying to convey.
Thank you, sir. So I think with that, we have come to an end to the student prepared questions. And now there's a small fun session by Gaurav for you.
Yeah, so I prepared some rapid fire questions for you. So one of us is like, what is your favorite movie that you wish you had worked on?
Fight Club.
Yeah. Yeah, and any, like, it's completely out of thing, but any specific reason as to why that?
David Fincher, and I was, I went on to eventually work with him on Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. And, I think he's an incredible director, one of the greatest out there. And it was a wonderful opportunity to work with him, because he's pretty much very different from almost every other director that I've worked with. Very particular, very careful. He comes around, watches everybody work, sees what everybody's doing. Very involved.
So, yeah, what was your favorite subject in architecture school?
History of architecture.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that goes without saying. Yeah, and your favorite set designer?
My favorite designer? Arthur Max. He's good. I love his work. Some of the older, set designers. It's a weird question, man. I'm still working with some of these people, so it's like, yeah, I love your work. And it's always, I think that Patrick Tatopoulos was somebody, he had done Dark City. I don't know if you guys seen that. It's from the 90s, I think. Yeah, but it's almost a precursor to the Matrix series. It's a similar storyline and came well before Matrix, and it's so much more darker and film noir, and the sets of which is incredible. I think that and maybe Lord of the Rings was one of them. Two movies that really got me very much in this. That I want to work in this field.
And what's your favorite pastime or hobby?
I love to surf. And, I still like watching movies.
Yeah, and what's your favorite movie genre for which you like to design sets?
Oh. See, that's a difficult one. I think that one of the things that I really like is that I'm jumping from, something which is period and it's historical to something which is science fiction. Science fiction is great. I have done a lot of that, action, science fiction, I would really like to work on, something like Mad Max was so beautifully designed, so carefully designed. Any of Guillermo del Toro's movies, the set design is so incredibly intricate in some of them. And I love that level of, detail and intricacies in that. Yeah. So, still want to do science fiction, but more, less technological, more, I guess, more organic.
So, yeah, that's like more or less it about the rapid fire. Thanks for that.
So basically, thank you, sir, for answering all of our questions patiently and for showing us like all these beautiful slides, like Hollywood and English movies. Just like you, for us, it was quite like a dream. And we have quite a few students who are really interested in cinema, who actually, want to work in the field. And I think this session would have been really, really useful to them. And it was very interesting. Like, we enjoyed every second of hearing you talk. And it's quite early there. So thank you for joining us at this time and accommodating us in your busy schedule. We really enjoyed the session. And yeah, so I think with this, we have come to the end of a very interesting evening. And we would like to thank Anshuman Prasad, sir, for accepting our invitation and sharing his experience and knowledge with us today. Thank you, sir. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And we would once again like to thank all our sponsors for their endless support. Stay tuned and follow our Instagram page at Archcult for more information on upcoming workshops and interesting guest lectures. Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you, everyone, and thank you, Gaurav and Anuradha, for organizing this. And please reach out to me through my website anytime. I will try and answer your questions or help you in any way. Again, always looking for new people to come in and join and get interested in the field. It's a lot of fun, and yeah. All the best to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.